Now for something completely different.
The Bitchspot Report. Welcome to the Bitchspot Report, the atheist podcast that isn't afraid to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We hope we can entertain, engage, and perhaps even enrage you with discussions of religion, politics, and beyond. Now let's begin this episode of the Bitchspot Report. Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of the Bitchspot Report. As you may have already noticed, there have been some changes around here. For one, my former co-host, for various reasons, is no longer with us. Luckily, Hausdorff, a guest from a few weeks ago, has agreed to step in and guest host the show for a couple of weeks until a permanent replacement can be found. Please, if you're at all interested in stepping into the guest host seat, I invite you to send me email at report@jdragononline.com or contact me on Twitter at Bitchspot1. I'm very interested in talking to you. But even if you're not interested in being on permanently, if you just want to jump in for a week or two as a guest host, let me know. We've already had a couple of people express their interest, so we'll see a variety of people in one capacity or another in the next couple of weeks. I was also thinking, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, I'd love to have an actual theist on the show who's willing to debate the existence of God. In just the last few weeks alone, I've seen at least a dozen theists online, in forums, on Twitter, etc., who said they can prove God exists. I've extended invitations to all of them, and so far none have responded. I don't know if that's surprising or not. So if any theists out there want to get on and really show what they can do, let me know. Well, this is an occasional segment, although, let's be honest, it's on a lot. It's where we can vent about one thing or another that we came across during the week. It can come from any source, and it just gives us an excuse to bitch about things that really piss us off. I understand you had something that made you mad this week, so why don't you go first, Hausdorff?
Absolutely. Well, the thing that has pissed me off this week is something that pissed me off quite a few. It's fairly common that I get pissed off by this. It's dishonest apologetics. Now, of course, this isn't all apologetics. I think some people who engage in apologetics really believe what they're saying. But a lot of the times, it's pretty clear they think it'll convince people that just don't think about it too hard. It's just sort of an ends justify the means thing. This is pretty obvious when you start engaging these people. You ask them questions, and they just can't give you a good answer. They just repeat their terrible argument. They straw man the hell out of us. It just drives me absolutely crazy.
Oh, I agree with you completely. I run into that constantly. You know, these people don't even understand what it is they pretend to believe. They just throw a bunch of arguments that they saw on a website someplace and think, well, hell, somebody said it on a website. It's got to be true. It's like, what is that that insurance company commercial where you can't put anything on the internet that's not true?
Right.
Well, I think a lot of these people think the same damn thing.
So those people, they actually do drive me crazy, but I sort of see them more as victims. I mean, they piss me off too, but what really drives me crazy is the people running the websites who pretty obviously know that what they're saying is garbage, but they just figure that people trust them and they can put up stuff and people will believe it regardless of how terrible the argument is.
Yeah, and usually the people who are running those websites are making money at it. So They're out there fleecing the gullible.
Yep.
Yeah, and then all the gullible people say, well, I'm just going to do whatever these people tell me to do and here, have a new check. Bunch of idiots.
Yeah. And I think the reason it really, really upsets me is because when I was a kid, I mean, I fell for that stuff because, I was surrounded by it all the time and, I didn't know any better. But I know that a lot of people get into adulthood and, never really learn to think for themselves, and it burns me up. Yeah.
I agree with you entirely on that. I don't get the people who just they blindly blather the same crap. And it's even worse when you prove for a fact that it's wrong, and then all they can do is just repeat it again because they really don't have anything else to say.
Yeah, and that's how you know that they're really dishonest. If you just destroy their argument, you prove them wrong, and then the next day you see them arguing with somebody else using the exact same points, and it's like I proved this wrong yesterday. And yeah, I've certainly come across some people who I think are genuine who like they'll kind of go, oh, that's interesting, and I'm like, okay, great, you know.
Yeah, go do your research, come on back.
And that's fine, but it's the people that, and like you said, usually people who are probably profiting off the whole thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it reminds me way back in the 80s when I first started doing this stuff, Dwayne Gish, who was a very prominent creationist debater, he had this big, long spiel about, the bombardier beetle was cooking up explosives internally, and there's no way evolution could explain how this beetle doesn't explode. And he got proved wrong repeatedly. He admitted he was wrong repeatedly. And then he just went out the next night to his next religious audience, repeated the same argument because they were too stupid to know any better. It wasn't until the days of the internet that kind of thing went away because, it was just videos of him up going, okay, I admit I'm wrong. That doesn't happen. He couldn't just go back the next night and keep repeating it because all you have to do is keep throwing up that YouTube video.
I love living in the future.
I do. It's fantastic, isn't it?
It's great.
The internet is going to kill religion.
I hope so.
I really do too. I think it's doing a good job so far.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, I really didn't have anything in particular that pissed me off this week, but I did have something that I thought was interesting.
Okay.
And wanted to see your take on this. Ever since Pope Francis got elected, I mean, seriously, am I the only one who, whenever you hear that name, it's like Pope Francis? Come on, come up with a manly name. Anyway, I've seen lots and lots and lots of staunch Catholics pointing out that everything he does is different. Although, as though that makes him a better pope. He didn't wear red shoes to his coronation or whatever the hell it is. So that makes him better. He doesn't dress up and sit on a golden throne like Benedict did, so he's better. He went and washed the feet of prisoners. That makes him better. I don't see any of this stuff making him a better person or a better pope. It just makes him a different person. If he wants to be better, let's see him turn over the entirety of the Vatican records on sex abuser priests to the proper authorities. That would make him a better pope. Let's see him change the church's stance on, priest marriage. Let's see him accept women as equals. Let's see him abolish the absurd prohibitions against birth control. All that stuff is going to make him a better pope. Now he's just a vaguely different but still entirely horrible pope with the ability to change things that he won't change.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't really thought about this, but I did see, I saw the things you're talking about, and I did appreciate that they're, the fact that he is taking down some of the ridiculous, the gold seat and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It kind of struck me as kind of nice, I guess. But it's certainly not like, I don't think it makes him a good pope for sure. Maybe it's like marginally better than the previous one, but like he's still crap.
Yeah, well, no, he took down the gold seat, and what did he do with it? He put it in storage. He didn't melt it down and sell it and help people with it. He just put it away in the Vatican storehouse.
Oh, see, that's okay. I didn't really think about that, but yeah, that makes it no better.
I'm sure the Vatican storehouse has a dozen gold thrones, and popes just go in and pick out the throne they like. I don't think that makes him a good person. It just makes him somebody with a different sense of style.
No, you're totally right, because I was thinking, he took it down, they must have gotten rid of it, but obviously that was silly, and I didn't think it through. I think if he would do that, if he would sell it and use the money to actually help people or something, that would be a good thing, but, you're right. What matters is what he actually did with the thing.
Yeah, he doesn't
and
do it.
If he wanted to be an actual good pope, he would have to do those other things that you said.
Yeah, if he'd do any of the things I said, he'd be a decent human being. Right now, he's not.
Right.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to... And now, the news. Welcome to the news segment. Every week we discuss news of the odd and interesting from various online news sources of varying degrees of reputability. We try to keep these stories relatively timely, but if anybody out there has a story you'd like us to take on, by all means, send it in a link to our website at report@jdragononline.com. This is a story that's going to be fun. All right. It clearly falls into the you can't make this shit up category. Comes from Raw Story. Concerned Minnesota man explains how butt enzyme cause AIDS. Speaking before a state House committee, which is voting soon on a gay marriage bill, quote unquote, concerned Minnesotan and father and husband Mike Fry presented his own version on how gay men contract AIDS. And I'm just going to read what he said because I can't make this crap up. When there's ejaculation into a vagina, there's a barrier there, as in your packet it states there, of a cellular tissue that don't allow the sperm that has an enzyme in the head of it to penetrate the blood flow. It is designed to go into the egg. That enzyme is meant to burn the outside membrane of the egg cell, go inside the egg, and then deposit genetic material. We call that conception. When ejaculation occurs inside a colon, it's highly absorbent material. The cells do not have a barrier for the sperm, and the enzyme gets into the blood flow. When those enzymes enter the blood flow, and a continued and prolonged environment to this happens, these enzymes into the blood flow, it causes what we know as AIDS. AIDS, of course, brings on common diseases, colds and things, and magnifies them to a point where it's unhealthy. Yeah, because we all know about the dreaded AIDS cold.
It's all I could do to not laugh while you were reading that. It's so ridiculous.
It is. I'm sorry, but I wasn't aware that diseases and colds were healthy to begin with. How does AIDS magnify them to a point when they're unhealthy? Dude, come on.
Well, my thoughts on this was, is this an argument against gay marriage? Like, suppose he was correct. So what? Like, if anything, it's an argument for gay marriage. Pair the gays off, and then, you know, I don't know. It just, the whole thing's stupid.
No, this is an argument for better science education.
Yes.
This guy isn't. And unfortunately, this is the kind of mentality that we're getting. I mean, right now in the Supreme Court, this is the kind of mentality we're getting presented for why we shouldn't have gay marriage, because these people are too stupid to come up with good reasons.
Well, there are no good reasons.
Well, they're not. And the funniest thing, I've been talking about this a lot lately. Religion is a complete non-starter. And the anti-gay marriage people have one reason for not wanting gay marriage, and that's religion. Well, they can't talk about religion. So they have to, like, tap dance around religion and make all these ridiculous arguments that don't make any sense. And then you've got all the religious justices on the Supreme Court who are doing the same thing, who are out there tap dancing around religion because they can't mention religion because religion is not a valid argument against doing a thing. These people don't understand that we have a secular government, and you can't religion, I don't care what your religion teaches, it has no bearing on how we run our government and how we run our country. You people need to grow up.
Yep.
Don't understand these people.
The only other thing about that article, based on what you read, it sounds like he's trying to claim that straight sex can't transmit AIDS. I mean, that in that ridiculousness that he said, he basically said that, right?
Essentially.
And so, like...
So let's not tell that to all the people who've gotten AIDS through bad blood transfusions.
I know.
Or, I'm sorry, but you can transmit AIDS just fine, between an infected person to a non-infected person, regardless of the genders of either of the people involved. It might be easier one way, but, ease of transmission doesn't mean a damn thing when you're dead in the end.
Right.
Oh, damn, I had a less of a chance of getting it, but I got it anyway, and now I'm going to die, but at least God doesn't hate me. I don't know. It's dumb. All right, let's go on to the next story.
All right, you want me to do one?
Yep, your turn.
All right, so this story was, I didn't write down where it's from. I think it was the Christian Post.
Yes, it was.
So there was a teacher who had his students write the name Jesus on a piece of paper, and then they stomped on it. And one of the students got upset at the whole situation, and he refused to do it, and he wound up getting sent, I think he got suspended.
Correct, yes.
So I found this, I found the the whole story hilarious. First of all, it's just a name written on a piece of paper. Like, it's really not that big of a deal. He's not trampling Jesus. But then I was thinking, what if it was somebody who I actually cared about? Like, if it was my wife's name, I probably wouldn't really want to trample all over it. But still, it's not magic. It's just a name written on a piece of paper. So I found the whole reluctance of people mildly silly.
Well, I mean, it is silly. I would stomp on anybody. It's just a bunch of chicken scratches on a piece of paper. Who cares? But the point, and if you read through the article, it says even the textbook that the teacher is going by says most people will hesitate or refuse to do this, and that's supposed to lead to a discussion of why people won't talk about this or why people won't do it. The whole thing is supposed to be an exercise discussing cultural symbolism and
right.
why people think some things are more important than others. The teacher turned around and violated the whole damn lesson plan.
I know that was what really jumped out at me about this article because, on one hand, I just found it amusing. On the other hand, the teacher totally screwed up. He's apparently teaching stuff that he doesn't even understand, which is just like, it's.
Yeah, are you going to teach this or not? Because if everybody in the class jumped up and down on the piece of paper, he's got nothing left to talk about.
Right.
And the other thing is, guys, this is an adult, all right? This isn't like some kid in high school who's refusing to do what his teacher says. This is an adult who is in that class. He's paying you to be there. He's paying your damn salary. And you're suspending an adult for not being your slave? That's stupid.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I have yet to see anybody discussing this story who agrees with the professor or the school. It's stupid. I mean, first off, you can't really suspend a student because they're paying to be there in the first place. You can ban them from your classroom, at which point in time I'd hope you'd have to give back the money that they spent. But
I don't know about that. I think if somebody was legitimately being a disruption, I would tell them to leave.
Well, that might be. Is this person being a legitimate disruption?
No, obviously not in this case, but I think in general.
Oh yeah, if somebody is really being out there, yeah, I would absolutely agree. Throw them out of the classroom, and that'll be that. But this is somebody who just refuses to step on a piece of paper. Seriously? That's the best you can do? I mean, what do you do with the guy who, tries to throw something in the trash can and misses? Oh, crap, you're suspended. Fuck you. Yeah, I don't get this. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
All right, well, we'll go on to our next one. This one comes from the Pew Research Center. There are an estimated 2.18 billion Christians around the world today, compared to 600 million in 1910. Of course, in that time, the population of the planet has increased from 1.8 billion to 6.9 billion, and more now. Christianity has maintained its share of the world's population, although it has shifted from a vast majority in Europe and the Americas, which was 93% in 2010 to 63% today, to the poorer nations of the world such as sub-Saharan Africa, where it has risen from 9% in 1910 to 63% today. Does this show that where religion is much more of a force among the poor and undeveloped countries, but as the world's population increases its technology, education, and resources, does this really prove that religion is doomed to slowly fail? And the funny thing I got out of this is it says that Christianity maintains its percentage among the world. Well, no, it doesn't. In 1910, 35% of the population of the world was Christian. Today, it's 32%. That's not stability. That's a loss. It's not a huge loss. I didn't even
check the numbers.
Yeah, it's not a huge loss, but I'm sorry. If it was stable, it would still be at 35%.
Oh, that's interesting.
But you have to remember, most of the people who are Christian today are the poor and the ignorant and the hungry and the people who just need something to believe in. The people who have brains and houses and food and the internet, largely they're giving up on religion.
Yep. And you can see, I mean, just looking at the numbers, you can tell that to maintain their numbers, the Christians have to go prey on people who are down and out, who don't have access to education and, advanced resources, who maybe don't have the time and ability to really think things through. And I mean, hopefully at some point when the rest of the world catches up, the religion will have nowhere to go to keep its numbers up.
Well, that's what I'm hoping for. We've even discussed this problem in the last couple of weeks in relation to Catholicism. Most first world countries are just giving up on it. France, only 1 in 10 professed Catholics in France go to Mass. They don't do it anymore. The only way these religions are maintaining their hold is by focusing on the poorest nations with the worst educational systems. And even in those countries, we're seeing Catholicism mixed with witchcraft. They're out killing albinos to use their body parts in magical ceremonies. And these are Catholics. These are the leading Catholics in the country who are, engaged in witchcraft and casting spells on each other.
Yeah, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's a good sign and religion is going down the tubes.
I hope so.
I'm hoping so too. All right, well, go ahead and jump into your last news story.
All right, so my last news story, this is a quick one. I don't have much to say about it, except just that it shows how far we've come. Karl Rove said that in 2016, he can imagine that the candidate for president would support gay marriage. And I think that is awesome.
I think it's amazing and fantastic. And even since he said this, you've gotten even more people on the Republican side coming out in favor of gay marriage. I mean, not even Rob Portman, et cetera, but you have a lot of people who are now saying, we just can't do this anymore.
It's incredible. So, yeah, like I said, I don't have a lot to say. Just it's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. It's it's even more proof that the religious are losing their grip not only on the world but on the Republican Party, which is something I didn't think we'd see. But hey, I can live with it.
Yeah.
All right.
This is the main event.
Welcome to the main event, our central discussion of the week. This is a debate that comes up almost constantly in atheist blogger circles, although I'm sure the problem goes far beyond that. There are many thousands of atheists at any one time who are debating religious topics such as the existence of God, church doctrines, etc., with believers online. Yet the overwhelming majority of these debates ultimately mean nothing. No one's mind is changed, and both parties go their separate ways without ever being convinced. Personally, I've lost count of how many debates I've had online, and can only think of 1 or maybe 2 cases in the past 30 years where I know I've actually convinced someone their religious beliefs are wrong. Granted, I could have planted the seed of doubt in many thousands of people over the years. I have no way of knowing. But is it really worthwhile to engage these people when there's no point, or there's really no chance, of them ever listening to what you say?
So I actually think that it is worth doing, and clearly you do as well because you keep doing it. But it's definitely not a sprint; it's a marathon. And I think the key word you said is that you only have a couple of times that you change their mind. I imagine there's probably more times that you have changed somebody's mind, maybe in retrospect. And I can only really point to my own experience. I know I debated with people when I was a Christian countless times, and most of them have absolutely no idea that they helped me along, but they did. But it kind of builds this big tapestry of arguments that eventually kind of overwhelmed me, and I realized that I was on the losing side.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I used to debate back when I was a Christian too, but to be real honest, I was so far gone. I will admit I just automatically rejected anything anybody said that didn't agree with what I already believed because I believed I was absolutely right and I could not possibly be wrong. My journey came a different way, as I talked about in the last show. But I don't know, it gets frustrating.
Oh, absolutely.
And I mean, I think it's funny, just in our little circle of bloggers, there's an awful lot of atheist bloggers who've been taking breaks lately because they're just so frustrated with all the things that they're writing. It's the same crap over and over and over, and Nothing ever changes. It's same shit, different theist. I I would probably feel better if I saw more theists who are actually able to critically evaluate their own religions, or even just listen, or even, even as we were talking before about the people who are just stupid and won't listen to anything that you have to say.
Yeah. Well, so one thing that I definitely think, I certainly didn't originate this idea, but I think it's important that there's always onlookers, whether it be on Twitter, which is sort of inherently public, or on blogs that other people can see. Because chances are the person that you're talking to isn't going to change their mind because they kind of dig in. But you never know if somebody kind of sees it and can see that the person that they agreed with is kind of getting their ass handed to them. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that's rare, but I do think it happens.
Oh, it definitely happens. My problem with doing it on like Twitter is usually Twitter is just so completely ideologically locked. You've got all the atheists on this side who are, they're the only ones watching this, are the people who are atheists or the people who are Christians. The Christians are never going to change their minds. The atheists are never going to change their minds. And usually it's just people out there yelling at each other.
Right.
And it doesn't you can't really debate very well in 140 characters anyway. That's why I've tried to do things on blogs. I definitely try to do things on forums where you have much more space and everybody can chime in and, attack all the straw men and all the fallacies. But even there, the religious just don't care. They just keep repeating the same stuff over and over and over and over. I was engaged in a debate recently where the guy, we proved absolutely positively there was no way he was right. And he just his response was, well, I'm right anyway. It's like, are you not paying it? Are we not reading the same debate? I don't think we are.
Yeah. And I mean, again, all I can think of is my own sort of personal experience with that. If I was the person doing the debating when I was a Christian, I would have done exactly that. But like somewhere inside, because maybe later on I'd sort of deconstruct it in my head, and like part of me would realize like I got my ass beat. And then that led me to look into things and, what did I do wrong? Why were my arguments weak? Which eventually led me to realize that I was actually wrong and not just that I was a poor arguer. So I don't know. I think it's a super long process and it's fairly unrewarding at the time.
Yeah,
which makes it very frustrating.
Yeah, I agree entirely. It's just when you do this day in and day out and week and month and years on end, and it's the same thing by the same people. I mean, like I said, going back to my thing with Dwayne Gish, he's just repeating the same arguments over and over and over and over. I mean, he's just blatantly dishonest. He's just a lying shit. But there's a lot of people out there who are they are so utterly fanatically convinced that they are right and they cannot possibly be wrong, that any argument they come up with likewise has to be right and cannot possibly be wrong, because otherwise they're going to hell and their little emotional comfort level goes down the tubes. And that's why most of these people are religious anyway. Right.
And I think it's also important to sort of, when you get into these debates, I think some people kind of get to the point where they're like, I have to convince this person. And I think it's important to just let yourself sort of bail. Usually what I do is as soon as the conversation kind of circles back to somewhere that we've already been, I'm just like, all right, I'm just disengaging, because otherwise it gets too frustrating.
Yeah, but of course then they just say, hey, look, I won. They were wrong.
Right. Or sometimes I'll kind of leave one last thing where, I'm sort of like, well, we already sort of covered this and I think we've both hashed out our points and, I'm done with this one or something. So, not sort of declaring that I won, but also making sure it's clear that they also didn't win, which I think has varying levels of success.
Yeah, no, theists have a tendency to declare victory even when they're getting their asses kicked.
Yeah.
Because they've got the perfect truth. They can't be wrong. So even if you just prove everything that they say is completely false, well, no, it can't be false because God told me otherwise.
Right.
And I've honestly had people who are sitting there channeling God. I mean, they will have a debate and they will be going, God told me this. All right. Now, exactly how did God tell you this? Did you go out to breakfast with God this morning? I mean, what did God have at Denny's? please explain how you know this. What was God wearing when he told you this? Oh, I just heard it in my head and I knew it was God. Okay, so you have some severe mental problems and you need some help. I can recommend some therapists. These people just have something wrong inside.
Yeah.
But, they're the ones, I think they're the ones who are out there on the front lines, doing all of the, the religious debating. And if you sit down and watch Twitter for any amount of time, you see the people who are just utterly crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone through a couple of waves of, I'll follow some, Christian, and I'll argue with them for a couple of days, and then I'll just unfollow them because I'm like, well, this person's very obviously dishonest. And it's like either they're a dishonest apologist or they're a Poe, and I can't tell the difference, and I don't care.
Yeah. Well, I don't ever follow I make it real easy because Twitter is way too easy to get yourself suspended by just responding to somebody who doesn't like what you have to say.
Right.
So as far as I'm concerned, I don't follow any religious people. If they will post something in like the atheist hashtag or, a hashtag that I look at, I might respond to them and there might be a discussion that goes on. I don't go chasing them down. I don't go off and start reading the Christian hashtags because, I'm not out to hunt them down. They come to me. And
sure.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to go and hunt you down and make you debate with me. But if you're going to come looking for a debate, which is exactly what you're doing, if you're posting to atheism or if you're posting to, whatever else, then it's open season on your ass and I'll go after you. But yeah, a lot of the times I will, there'll be a few exchanges. It'll be very painfully clear that they're just out of their gourd.
Sure.
Who's that one? I don't even remember what the hell his name is. The crazy Catholic guy who used to want to be a priest and now he hates Catholicism, but he still follows it or something.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'd have to look him up. He has like 25 different accounts because he keeps getting himself banned because he keeps harassing people. But that's kind of the general guy. Oh yeah, hey, that's the kind of people that we have on Twitter.
Right.
Yeah. So do you really think it's worthwhile? I mean, not only just on Twitter and blogs and forums and things, but is it really worthwhile to go out and directly engage these people, or should we just answer their claims and, not bother chasing them down, or what?
That's an interesting question. I think I prefer sort of the situation where you kind of throw your information out there, and if they respond to it, give them an opportunity to engage you, but don't exactly chase them down. So, I guess most of my conversations on Twitter, I'll post something maybe related to a blog post that I've made, and if some Christian responds to it, that'll sort of get us into a conversation, and then we can kind of, open up and have a good discussion. I don't know how much I like. I guess I don't want to pester people. And, plenty of religious people, even though I think they're wrong, they're not causing any specific problem, and sort of us being pains in the ass doesn't really help us at all.
No, I leave that to them.
Yeah. So I like, have the blog sort of, if they have a blog, go ahead and write comments on there, post things to the atheist hashtag that they might want to respond to. And if they respond, great. And if they don't, well, oh well.
Yeah. Well, that's really why I spend most of my time debating on forums, because there's hundreds of people posting all the time, and all you have to do is find something that you disagree with or find something that's not supported or whatever, and you can immediately say, well, I've got a problem with this. This is not true. Back this up. I want your evidence, whatever. And you can get into a discussion that way directly without having to say, just post something out of the blue says, all Christianity sucks and piss people off enough to make them come and try to debate you.
Sure. Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, sometimes, I guess I like the idea of putting out our stuff and seeing if they'll respond. And if they're making some crazy claims to really try to debunk them, that's probably where we should spend our time, I would say.
Yeah, it's a lot easier than just poking the bee's nest and seeing what comes out.
Yeah.
All right, so our general point of view is don't piss off the Christians, but respond, I guess.
I guess feel free to piss them off, but let them engage us rather than running out to get them for the most part. Assuming they're not, taking advantage of people, or, I don't mind sort of spending a little time going after somebody who's, I don't know, a huckster.
Or, the Phelps clan. Those people just invite attention.
Right. Because, they're really,
That's
those
all
guys
they
are
want.
baiting people to go attack them. In fact, I would say we should ignore them, but for a different reason, because that's exactly what they want.
Well, of course. But most religions, or, a lot of Christian apologists, that's specifically what they do. And that's exactly what you see on Twitter when you get these people who just throw the most annoying crap on the atheist hashtag because they want attention.
Right.
And the best thing you can do is not give them that attention, or better yet, find some way to get them suspended. But I really don't want. I really am so tired of the whole Twitter suspension game thing.
Yeah, I'm not terribly interested in getting people suspended.
Well, spammers, I will.
Sure.
If you are just an out and out spammer, the first thing I do is report you for spam, and that'll get you taken care of. But
sure.
Otherwise, I don't do that. Since I don't follow them in the first place, I don't unfollow them, and that's what triggers most of the suspensions anyway. So, they can't blame me for anything that happens to their account. They can only blame their own stupidity. All right.
All right.
So we done here?
I think we're done here.
All right. Let's go ahead and move on to our next segment.
You believe what? No. Oh, no.
We've been looking at different aspects of the Bible recently, from the flood story to creation to the resurrection. But one thing we haven't touched on is the concept of hell. According to some apologists, hell is a place of eternal torment, torture, and damnation, reserved for unpenitent sinners and those who reject God's grace. It seems strange that an all-loving God would send somebody for an eternal punishment simply for not believing in him. But there you go. It's quite a controversial subject, even among Christians. However, is it really biblical? Is there any reason to think that condemning a non-believer to an imaginary place is a viable apologetic solution? So why don't we go ahead and discuss first, what the Bible says hell is, and then we'll get into specifics.
Sure. So I guess it sort of depends on where you look. And the first thing that I was thinking about is what does Jesus say about hell? Because, of course, this is a trick that a lot of Christians will pull. If you're like, well, such and such is in the Bible, they're like, yeah, well, what did Jesus say? And, Jesus, he was pretty vague about it, in all honesty. But he quite a few times mentioned weeping and gnashing of teeth. And in Matthew 13, he specifically mentions a fiery furnace. So we can definitely see some of this burning imagery, for sure.
Yeah.
Directly from Jesus. And then the other place that I would look would be in Revelation. And there's a few places that the lake of fire and sulfur are specifically referenced. But as far as the picture that most people kind of have in their head, that's pretty overblown compared to what's actually in the Bible.
Yeah. Well, we all know I tend to go into details on where they actually get the stories and the linguistics behind it and all that. The fact is there really isn't anything in the Bible about hell. Well, there's very, very little that's in the Bible regarding hell. Most of it is mistranslations.
That's not surprising.
Yeah. There's a couple of words used in Hebrew that have been changed later to refer to hell. The first one, and the one that Jesus actually used quite often, was Gehenna, which is very well known at the time of Jesus. It actually referred to a real place, which was the trash heap outside of Jerusalem, where the Jews disposed of anything they didn't want, like trash, to the bodies of executed criminals. They kept the fires of Gehenna burning with sulfur in order to burn their trash or their garbage to ash. Lots and lots and lots of places in the Bible, like Matthew 10:28, James 3:6, Luke 12:5, Matthew 5:22. The actual words used in those places was Gehenna. So they weren't actually ever referring to hell. They were referring to a trash heap outside the city walls.
That's awesome. So Jesus wasn't actually saying that they're going to hell. He was just saying that we're going to throw them away, basically.
Essentially. Then if you go back and look at some of the places in the Old Testament, of course, it refers to Sheol. And if you look at that graphic that I sent you for the guest post I did in your blog, and I'm going to put it back, I'm going to put it onto this podcast as well, there's a big place underground called Sheol in Jewish mythology. And essentially that was just a place for the dead. That was just, you buried a body and it went to Sheol. Virtually all the Old Testament passages that are now used to refer to hell use the word Sheol, which was never a place of torture. It was never a place of flames. It was a storage place for dead bodies that were gone. So no hell there. You also have the word Hades, which gets used a couple of times in the New Testament. And of course, that's the Greek word for the underworld. It means in Greek hidden or unseen. And of course, the Greek culture was very well known at the time of the New Testament, and it was really used as a more popular, more up-to-date term than the older Sheol. We actually have Martin Luther to thank for the word hell when he he actually named it. He didn't name it. It happened at his time when he was writing about the Bible. He translated the word in German is spelled Holle, which later translators just took that word and transliterated into hell. So that's why we have the name hell.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and of course, the other word that ever gets used, 2 Peter 2:4 used the word Tartarus, and of course Tartarus was the Greek mythological place of torment for the damned. It's where they sent all the worst Greek criminals, like the Titans, who were condemned by Zeus, etc., etc., etc. That's probably where they got the idea for all the flaming and burning and crap. And of course, we do see some of those references in Revelations. But let's face it, Revelations is just a big drug trip gone wrong anyway.
Right. Revelation was absolutely crazy. If you haven't read Revelation yet, definitely check it out. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's, somebody was smoking something and they weren't sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, even if you look through the New Testament, the idea of hell doesn't even make any sense. For example, Romans 6:23 says, "For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord." Well, it doesn't say the wages of sin is eternal torture. It says death. There's many, many passages in the Bible that just says, if you're evil, you die. If you're good, you go off to live in heaven or, eternal paradise. It never says that you go off and you fry forever in a lake of eternal fire.
Somehow people have what I learned was when it says death, what it's talking about is, this eternal death or something. This eternal being tortured is death versus going to heaven is life or something. Like, it doesn't really make sense, but as they do a lot, if you repeat it enough, people just buy it.
Yeah, well, and especially when you look at all of the different things, as the translators throughout the centuries have, copied and copied and copied and copied and copied this, all the original stories have been changed. If you go back to the earliest copies, they're not like they are in the modern Bible. And that's because most of the people who were translating, they were translating new versions of the Bible, they weren't translating from the original documents or the oldest known documents, since there are no original ones. They were translating from another copy of another copy of another copy of another copy. So all these errors just keep getting compounded.
Yep.
I always find it funny that people are going, oh, well, the King James Version of the Bible is the most accurate. No, the King James Version is the most ridiculously inaccurate. It was written, it was copied by people who were working from copies of copies of copies of copies, and then they went through and made changes just to make King James happy, because otherwise he'd kill the translators.
Well, clearly that's what God wanted, though.
Oh, of course, yes, that makes complete and perfect sense.
Yes, absolutely.
The other thing I don't really get, and this is just me, there's a lot of atheists out there who really, really get bothered when theists condemn them to hell. Now, I mean, one I can think of off the top of my head is Jeff D., who is often on the Atheist Experience TV show, but he really gets pissed off when Christians say, well, you're going to hell. But I don't think that makes any sense, because hell isn't real. I mean, would you get pissed off? Why would you get pissed off? It's like saying, well, I'm pissed off because you're threatening to send me to Hogwarts. Okay, go for it.
I mean, is he just offended by the very idea that that's how that person deals with losing? I mean, it's like, perhaps it's a Christian way of saying fuck you. Instead of saying fuck you, they're saying, oh, you're going to go to hell.
Well, in a lot of ways that's true, but
is that the reason that it upsets him?
I mean, I don't want to put words into his mouth, but from what I recall the times he's talked about it, I think he's offended because he thinks that he takes it as a threat that Christians are threatening him. Well, really, how much of a threat is it saying you're going to go to hell? Yeah, it's about as much a threat as saying Harry Potter is going to come kick my ass. Okay. If you don't believe it exists, then it's not really a threat.
I think it ultimately depends on his motivation for being upset. Because if obviously he doesn't think hell is real. He doesn't think he's actually going to hell. But, if somebody told me that a Dementor was going to come attack me, and they really believed it, it would piss me off. Not because I'm scared, just because that person's being an asshole to me. I don't know how upset I would get, but that's the only justification I could think of.
Yeah, I don't really... I can't get upset at that kind of thing because it's just laughable. Okay, yeah, you can, your dragon is going to come step on me. All right, sure, whatever. It's just something I'm going to sit there and laugh at this person because they're just being an idiot.
Yeah, I imagine, I think I would probably just shake it off like that as well. But that, it seems reasonable to not want somebody to, to end an argument that way. It's like, all right, well, now you're just attacking me with, granted, with something that's not going to do anything, but nevertheless, you're trying to attack me, so screw you, I'm going to kick you off my show kind of thing. I can see that.
Yeah, I can't see taking personal offense to it. I can certainly see, saying that as an argument, as a debate tactic, that it's pretty crappy. But to take offense at something like that, it's a little bit silly in my view.
I could agree with that. I would also say I'd have to see the episode in particular, but it's also probably a good way to just, in a funny way to kick them off the show, where once we're getting to that point, the call is probably getting uninteresting, and it's like, all right, well, screw you, and then hang up. I don't know. I'd have to see the episode, though.
Well, it's not just an episode. It's been an ongoing thing. It's kind of like a bugaboo of his for years.
Gotcha.
I'm sure there are places where he's discussed it in detail, and the hundreds of shows he's been on. I really couldn't go back and look, but
sure.
I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me to be upset about, imaginary things or going, well, God's going to punish you. Okay. God's going to punish me. Zeus is going to punish me. Thor is going to punish, Thor's going to come hit me with his hammer. Okay. Whatever turns you on, dude. Let's get back to the debate.
The only other thing that I can think of, and of course this is obviously very much conjecture, but we know that a lot of people, when they leave Christianity, the fear of hell is one of the last things to go, because that's pounded into your brain since you're a baby, basically. And maybe some of the listeners who are, just becoming an atheist but still very scared of hell would actually be, disturbed by that.
Yeah, that's very possible. I mean, I remember when I was leaving the faith, it wasn't necessarily hell, but it was just, you kind of get that thing in the back of your head, well, maybe there's something out there.
Right.
And maybe I should act better because maybe I don't want to get punished for doing something wrong. I don't know, maybe hell just hangs on longer than the faith.
I think it does just because it's so scary, It certainly was the last thing to go for me. But ultimately, I think you have a pretty good point that being upset that a Christian tells you to go to that you're going to go to hell is pretty silly.
Yeah, I'm not worried about going to hell. Are you worried about going in the ground and just ceasing to exist? That's what scares the crap out of most Christians.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Hey, they're all going to Sheol. Hey, it's in the Bible.
It's in the Bible. It's what's going to happen.
It's in the Bible, and it's actually factually true. One of the few things you can actually find in the Bible. So, do we have anything else to say about hell?
I think that's good.
All right. And that's our show. But before you go, I'd like to extend a very special thanks to Hausdorff for sitting in this week, and to all our listeners. We couldn't make a show without you. As I said at the beginning of the podcast, we still need a permanent co-host. Please get in contact with us if you're interested, or for those who just want to sit in for a week or two, let us know that too. I'd especially like to invite any theists who think they can rationally debate their religion to send an email, even if you don't want to be on the air. I'd love to debate you in any capacity. We'll be back next week with more rational, intelligent, atheist perspectives. See you then. You've been listening to the Bitchspot Report with your host, Cephas. You can follow me on Twitter at Bitchspot1. Please check out our podcast website at report.jdragononline.com. You can watch our podcast on YouTube at youtube.com/The Bitchspot Report. We're also available on iTunes. The link is at our site. Please subscribe and rate us. It really helps us a lot. We'll be back next week for another fact-filled episode of the Bitchspot Report. Please tune in again.